Okay, man sewing fans, welcome to my laboratory today, where we're gonna take the traditional bug jar quilt and just creep it up a bit using some wonderful Tula Pink fabrics. Let's get started. That's right, I've got a super simple and fun take. We're gonna go applique style today on the traditional bug jar quilt. And the reason we're going applique is I wanna play with a bunch of fussy cut and make some fun sciencey jars, beakers and flasks and silly stuff. If you look at the quilt behind me, this Tula Pink De La Luna fabric is absolutely fantastic. Not only do I love Tula as a person, but I love her graphic styles here, and her illustrations are beautiful. So we're gonna make a bunch of different jars. I'm gonna show you how to put these wonderful different corks in to keep your solutions and matter where it belongs, and every now and again it'll sneak out, and we'll even talk about some of those bubbles and spider webs and whatnot. So we've got to build our background first, and I've already told you I'm using Free Spirits De La Luna by Tula Pink, but in the background I'm also using some Robert Kaufman fabrics. I've got 1 3/4 yards of this blue called Nightfall, and then 3/4 of the Hibiscus, which is actually the lighter of the two you see for the shelves, and then the dark violet, you'll need 1/4 yard of that to make this little shadow below here. And that's all we need to do. We need to build a canvas or a series of shelves first to place those beautiful jars on top of. And the math is pretty much the same all the way through. I've got a quick little trick, so stay close here. And there's a printable in the link next to the supplies below for you. So with that said, every one of your shadows for your shelves is going to be cut at 1 inch. No problem there, every one of them. And you can make this as large as you'd like, really. This particular quilt is 44 inches by 60 inches. The shelves themselves are always going to be a 4-inch cut for you. No problem there either. But to make it look like the shelf is proportional, at the bottom down here, I have a 2-inch strip below the last shadow of the shelf. Up here, this blue piece is 7.5 inches, where the rest of the blue shelves, or the blue for the wall is 8.5 inches. And that just gives you that proportionality that makes it look perfect. And again, you see these strips here. There's my 8.5, my 4, and my 1. I'm making 3 of these cuts like this to sew them together, as you see, to form the middle section of my shelving. And then just a reminder, that top blue is a little bit smaller, and I've got a little bit of extra blue on the very bottom row for the balance of the project. So get all of your rows built like this, join all of your rows, and then go ahead and prepare your appliques. And to prepare your appliques, I've taken basically fat quarters of the De La Luna fabrics that I loved. And why did I love them? I'm going to talk about the small prints first. Why do I love them? Because they're awesome, and there's little fun bats, and I've got skulls in here, and I've got eyeballs, and I've got moths with skulls and lightning bolts. It just goes on and on. So these are the pieces that I want to put inside of my little jars. So these are going to be my applique sheets, or my applique fabrics. So what I've done is I've already pre-fused the Heat and Bond Feather Light to the back of all of these pieces that you see here. So we're ready to rock and roll, so I can just start becoming very, very creative. What I want is I want symmetry in my jars or my flasks or my beakers. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do, let's make an easy one that's about 5 inches wide. So I'm going to take and I'm going to start by cutting a rectangle through here like this. Okay, and I'm going to make this just a little smaller. So make your cuts of your applique pieces down to the sizes you're going to want them. So of course, because our wall space isn't much more than 8, maybe I should be talking about making them no larger than 7 inches tall kind of thing. That'll help. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and I find it's easiest if I fold fabric to fabric, and I'm folding it in half. And I'm folding it in half to get that symmetry. Once it's folded in half like this, I'm going to use my shark applicutter, and I'm first cutting the bottom. And as I cut the bottom here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to start to curve that side edge. Then I can rotate it so it's nice and safe. And that side edge, I can bring it in and back out. And then let's go straight to the top kind of thing. So then when this opens up, it makes this fun looking, crazy little jar, right? So this is pretty clever. I like the way it looks. I have my eyeballs facing upright. I forgot to point out looking at your prints or your scales that are in there. But we don't want our eyeballs to get away, so we're going to need to cork those bottles. Where do I get my corks from? The corks were all coming from the wonderful theme print of De La Luna, which features different faces, and there are multiple color ways available for this. I've used 2 colors in the quilt you see behind me. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to fussy cut this, so I'm prepared to put them on the shelves also. So it does have the fusible web already fused to the back. You can actually see, this is a good one, that I had fused multiple layers of fusible web, but I don't ever overlap them because I don't want that paper to get stuck in between. This is where I was splicing on the other big piece that was used for the faces you see on the shelf there. So now what I need to do is I need to fussy cut along these edges over here, but I want to point out, I'm just not going to dive right into this because there's so many key elements in the background. Look at this wonderful eyeball that's right there. That eyeball right there would make a fabulous cork. I've also used several of these parts and pieces right in here. And the fun part, there's a little lightning bolt and skull and crossbones, and it flips over so it's always right side up when we're using it. So when I started looking at this for the fussy cut, this is the piece I want. I'm going to first start with my shark here, and I'm literally just kind of setting a guideline, and I'm watching out for the blue, and I'm also watching out for the gray because I want that gray to be able to use as a cork later on. So I come around here, let's say I also want to use this portion down here for a cork later on. So at this point here, I can come up here and I'm just going to change the design slightly there, like this, so that now this part has symmetry, and I can see I left that bump a little long, right? So I can start to shave this down very easily, but what I've actually effectively done is I've saved this piece. And with this piece, if I want to use this for a cork, what I'm going to then do is I come in here and then I'm going to put my scissor and I'm going to cut the scissor line along where I'm seeing that turquoise or that light blue come into the black. And because I have about 4 different elements I was able to find in the different pieces in the background of that face fabric, I actually use this same section over and over again. Maybe you can look at the quilt behind me and look at some of those wonderful jars and their corks while I'm cutting this out. But you'll notice that I've just basically taken the top off sometimes or the sides off. So I even just cut this section a little bit different each time to make it look different and unique so that every jar has some fun character. Okay, we're almost done with this. And I love applique. I get lost right now. I actually forgot you were all watching me right now. And I just wanted to zone out and continue to cut my little applique piece. So now we're going to go ahead and fit this jar in at first. So I'm just dry fitting it, and you can see how nice the cork fits in. It'll cover that. But let's say, for example, I've already made a few other corks so we can talk about. Here's one. We started. So let's say this cork here, I wanted this cork to fit in like this, and I don't like these squared out edges. So some of the other tricks I was doing is I would just fold it back up like yay, and then I'm going to round the top because I'm thinking these are supposed to look like glass. And then I'm just going to kind of do a little curve in like this just to give a little bit more character. See that? Like that. And then this cork like this would fit in there very cool. A cork like this here, I've had a couple others I was making. Oh, did I drop them on the floor? Oh, here they are. They're everywhere. I love it. Just like a good old science lab, parts and pieces everywhere. So this one will look completely different just by cutting the little sides off of that. So this one's not going to fit in here very nicely. Let's save that for a skinny, like we'll make a beaker here in a second. I'll show you that. I also wanted to talk about these wonderful eyeball pieces. So an eyeball like that makes a great cork, and sometimes you can set it down in here like this, or you could flip it over, of course, like that. But the other part that's part of the eyeball is also wonderful for a cork. So watch this. I'm just going to take this off here with that wonderful little shark cutter there, like that. And then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to just square it. And then you could either plant it in like this into a skinny one, or like this to finish off. I just keep playing, matching, and I'm also looking at some of the color combos. So let's quickly show you a few more jar elements. That'll be fun. I've already got this wonderful pink skull made up. Let's focus on that for about the center there. And then let's do a real skinny, like what would be a beaker. That'll be fun. So again, coming across the bottom, I just like it to have a little bit of a straight edge and then round up. And look how I'm turning the fabric almost more than the cutter. And now I'm just going to start this nice line moving, let's do it right here, moving up towards the top. And then I'm thinking about that glass lip at the top again. So I'm going to come out, flare it a little bit. And then I'm just going to come around like this. And look at this wonderful shape, how easy that turns out, right? And so this one here would be fabulous with that small little cork placed right in there like that. Now, if you look also at the quilt, as I was mentioning, some of my jars, like here and over here and over here, the solution's not completely full in the jar. So to give that last little look, I used a Robert Kaufman solid. It's the frappe color. And it just has that wonderful kind of crazy sciencey solution color, I think. Now this already has your fusible web on the back. And in order to make this fit in the top half of the jar, the easiest way to do it is to quickly find ourselves a rectangle that's safe to use. So I'm just going to come in here, and I'm making this large, of course. And I am right-handed, so let's make sure I'm not getting carried away. Like this. And then you can either simply take this here and watch this fun. Oh goodness, I've lost the cutter. Now I'm starting to get ready to dive into those solutions. I shouldn't tell you what's in the jars, right? Okay, so for fun, let's take the bottom edge and put a little wave line on it like that. Then wherever I want this to fit into my jar, I can just position it like this. And now I'm going to carefully just follow the line. So like with a lot of our applique quilts, it's a little bit less accurate, a little bit more wasteful, but the cool thing about it is with all this fuse is all of these parts and pieces are not considered scrap or waste until I'm totally done, because I keep going back to those treasures and placing them in different locations throughout the project. Now this here is going to go ahead and run its way through like that, but then later on it will be repositioned into the jar. So if you're looking at it like I can see it, this right here would form like a perfect jar. Isn't that super cool like that? Okay, so there's a couple other things I want to discuss in layout or placement on our shelves. So as our shelf piece comes in, I have about 5 or so jars on each shelf, or flasks or beakers. But the next thing I did do is I really purposefully worked hard to make sure that all of the jars were not in the same line along the bottom on that shelf. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take your tall ones and bring them a little lower down here, and you'd be looking at them like this, getting them all set up. And then you take your big ones like this, push them back a little further, and then you could look at this. And then I went as minute in the details as trying to not make the same color corks show up in the same place. So maybe I'm going to remove that one and bring this cork in. And I went through and I positioned each piece as I loved it across the whole quilt. And then once all of your jars or your flasks and your beakers are made, you'll just simply need to take off the paper off the back. So you just grab these. If you've never worked with the fusible web before, I kind of roll it a corner and pick at it. And what you really want to do is make sure that as you peel this away, you can see that sheen of the glue is now on the fabric itself. So there's glue here. So then I'm going to peel this back. And of course I would be on an ironing surface, so I can't iron it here on my cutting mat. So I would put that in position, and then I would peel the paper off of this one, like that, and I would put that in position, and the cork, and so on and so forth until I have everything just the way I want it. It all gets ironed down, and then following me to the quilt for the last conversation about all the machine quilting we've done, the first step we need to do, and I'm not doing a satin stitch or a blanket stitch, I'm simply doing free motion machine stitching, but I'm doing just around the perimeter of the jar, any of the solution, any of the corks. I'm doing all of that work first. And that essentially holds all of the jars down, but it then basted the quilt all over again, even though it had been safety pin basted. So then I could pull all of those safety pins out of the way, and I went into the back detail, and I first put in bubbles near my half-empty jar. It's just to make it more fun and entertaining, because we all know that every quilt tells a story, and my story was creepy science, and this is what made it fun. And then of course I also started laying some spider webs in some of the key locations just to let us know what would be going on, because I've got moths flying around in there as well. And the final machine quilting was our wood grain texture that I've done in this background blue, just to pull it all together and look like a real wall in the back of my real science laboratory. And believe it or not, for all of these videos, you all thought I was sewing, but no, I wasn't. I've been doing science just the way I like it. I just use textiles every single day right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here and here. And while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action.